I did give credit here somewhere at the bottom of the page, but they are just absolutely beautiful. I could sit and look at those for hours. I didn't, but I could. So, okay. We are getting close to 2, but we'll give a couple more minutes for people to join us, and then we will get started. So thanks to everyone who has joined us already. So we'll encourage you to use your chat box if you want to join us at any time with a question for our speakers or to communicate with us. I know a lot of our regular attendees are at the NEDA conference, but I know we'll have good attendance. And I see a lot of people are joining us. So we'll wait just one more minute or so, and then we'll be ready to start. Okay. Well, I think we're close enough to 2 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and get started so that all of you can get back to the NEDA conference if you're joining us from there, or to your activities. We do appreciate all of you joining us, and welcome to the May HomeNE webinar. I am so excited to have Jacob Jennings and Jonathan Jank joining us today. We always do a practice session with our speakers, and I can't tell you how much of a lift to my day when we did our practice session with them yesterday morning. So they are fun, engaging, and I have no doubt they'll be an informative presentation. So welcome, and thank you for joining us on our statewide HomeNE Learning Network. The South Central Economic Development District does serve as the lead agent for this learning network that expands around beyond Nebraska. So it is designed for all people from all corners of the state and beyond to join us as they successfully seek to answer the housing challenges that they are experiencing in their local community. As I've mentioned today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Jonathan Jank and Jacob Jennings from the Seward County Chamber and Development Partnership. Did I get that right, you guys? In the right order? Perfect. So Jonathan serves as the president and CEO, while Jacob serves as the director of community affairs. So just a big warm welcome and thank you to both of you for joining us today. And I am going to let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves and the wonderful work that they're doing there in Seward County. So welcome to both of you, and just take it away.
Sounds great. Well, thanks, Lori. Really appreciate the opportunity to present to this group today, and really love to tell the Seward County story, specifically around housing. And, you know, we're going to maybe take a little bit of a unique approach, as you can see through the title of our presentation, with it being picking up the pieces through housing innovation. And I think likely all of you in the various communities you're coming from have properties, infill properties, dilapidated buildings, things like that, that need new life breathed into them. And so we're going to tell some of those stories that we've been able to work on in Seward County. So would also love to hear others' feedback in some of the, I'll say, housing innovative projects that you've done over the years as well, because we're sure not the experts, but we can tell you what we've been able to do in Seward County to help pick up those pieces over time. So we'll go with the next slide, and we'll do kind of formal introductions here. So Jacob, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Jacob Jennings. I've been with SCCDP for the last year and a half, serving as the director of community affairs. So I work alongside Jonathan with housing initiatives, as well as childcare initiatives, broadband initiatives, some workforce development, some business recruitment and retention Yeah, been doing this for about a year and a half. So
Yeah, and I've been in the industry for just over 11. All of that time in Seward County. Actually came to Seward County through Concordia University, and I've been there almost 20 years now. They haven't kicked me out yet, as I say, and absolutely love the place that my family calls home. Specifically about our organization, we were established as a combined Chamber of Commerce economic development organization back in 2016. We're a public-private partnership, 501c6 nonprofit organization, about 290 public and private sector members from across the county and actually the region, people that maybe have headquarters outside but do work in Seward County and want to partner with our organization. And the reason we were founded back in 2016 is because in 2015, there was a visioning process of what they wanted Seward County to look like by the year 2035. And through that process, they ultimately needed to determine who was going to be the caretaker and steward of fulfilling that vision over the next 20 years. So in early 2016, we had 3 existing chamber economic development groups formed together into this new partnership. And ultimately launched what we are still today. And then ultimately how we're kind of moving the ball down the field to fulfill that vision by the year 2035 is a multi-year strategic plan. So we just finished one up in 2022, and we just launched into our next multi-year strategic plan, which will be 23 through 25. And housing has been a critical component of that. And as you'll see on subsequent slides, it all comes back to the numbers for us. What are we doing to move the needle, specifically on housing? And then we'll tell some of the stories, that are surrounding that. Next slide. So I am assuming many of you in individual communities or even regions, you're talking about housing studies, and we're no different. We use our housing study a lot. We actually have a site visit with a potential housing developer on Friday, and we're going to talk about the housing study and say, what are the specific needs? And as we know, what sort of your professional skill set, background, appetite for type of housing, we make sure that it's a fit, that it matches up with what our specific needs are. You can see what was the anticipated need for additional housing by 2024. So we did this in 2019. There's actually, you can go to our website, cultivatesewardcounty.com, and read more about our housing study if you're interested in that. But then you can see what are our targets ultimately. And specifically what we're going to talk about is focused on workforce housing in our presentation today, that aligned with some infill properties that we're working on. But you can see that the housing types are quite diverse, and the projects that we're working on are quite diverse in sort of the single family, duplex, townhomes, in what we're able to get done ultimately to fulfill the needs identified in the housing study. Next slide. So I'll just kick off to start by saying we're really grateful for the Rural Workforce Housing Fund. And, I think a number of our colleagues across the state have been doing some amazing work utilizing this tool. We were fortunate to be funded in the second round of Rural Workforce Housing Fund in 2020. And we're going to talk about the 4 projects that we're working on specifically from that initial allocation. But then we were just informed that we're awarded for our next round here in 23. And we have a tremendous amount of generous local donors, investors that helped provide matching funds for us to pursue these dollars. And so, unbelievably grateful. And it sounds like the legislature is going to continue to allocate funds towards this. If you're not familiar with the program, we're happy to answer questions, but I would just encourage you to take time to get to know it. I think it's one of the most important housing tools that we have in our tool belt as economic developers to provide gap financing. And when we say gap financing, our definition of that is typically you're going to go to a primary lending institution to secure your 80% funding, and then you're going to have to come up with a 20% down payment ballpark. And so these funds help serve a percentage of that, along with owner's equity, and then potentially other gap financing tools that we'll talk about that we've used, for these 4 different projects that we're going to highlight. Any other thoughts on this, Jacob?
No, I feel like this is probably a pretty familiar program for most of us in this world. But it's been super beneficial for us, and our community has been really getting behind this as well. Half or a third of this most recent round has been raised locally. The definitions of workforce housing, just to remind everyone, is right now it's currently $325,000 or less for owner occupied. That used to be lower, but it's gone up, thankfully, as everyone's aware of the sort of the increase in costs in housing. And then for rental occupied or rental housing, that's $250,000 per unit. And you can see we have some different styles of housing in those 4 projects, and so we've been able to work within those numbers. In total, these 4 projects, once they're all completed, that'll be 91 new housing units in Seward County. This initial amount of 1.263 million has turned into over 15 million of investment. So it's been a great tool to encourage developers when they know they have this funding that's in the form of low interest loans that we provide. It helps them make the numbers work for their projects.
And I'll just add too, just so you know how we have created sort of our terms. They're different for every project. We're happy to go into individual terms if that's helpful. But we have seen this as a revolving loan fund. So the assumption is that, we're setting individual terms based on the needs of the developer and the project. But the assumption is that gets paid back over time, based on what they need to make the project work. Our typical kind of stated interest rate for the loan is half of prime. So as we get ready for this next round of applications here in the new allocation, the 1.134 million that we'll be receiving sometime this summer, prime rate right now is at 8%. And so we would anticipate likely the next round of loans being around 4%. And then term wise, it could be 10 years or less, typically for these first 4 projects. But we can be pretty flexible. That's a nice thing of having local control. And especially that, things happen in projects. And so we can be flexible if we need to be to make sure that developers are successful with their projects. Next slide. So just to kick off, Seward Townhomes. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit of the background on how this got done. And I think everyone on the call in your individual communities, your regions where you're serving, probably have infill lots. And what we mean by infill, they're places that could be a part of a subdivision that just never got done, for example. This is an example of that. Or infill could be where there was a fire that burned something down years ago and nobody's done anything with it. We'll have another story about that here in a little bit. So I would encourage you to see those lots that sometimes can be eyesores to be seen as opportunities. And so for this project, it was a former middle school site in Seward, and there was a bond issue passed to build a brand new, beautiful middle school on the north side of town. Well, this former middle school site is right on within the downtown district. So it's highly visible right off of US Highway 34. We needed to do something good with it. Unfortunately, we were able to find a developer for the project that kicked this off, and it's actually a multi-use development site. On the property, on the north side of the property, there's a bank branch, there's a church, we have an optometrist, dental clinic, chiropractor, and then on the backside is housing. And we initially had a housing developer that built a number of townhomes there, but then they didn't finish the last 8 units. So those have been sitting for about 10 years from when they originally worked on this project. And so we were fortunate that we had then a local developer within the last couple of years now reach out to the owner of those lots, and just a wonderful builder that had a vision for filling in these infill lots, and they were kind of close to each other. So I think there's we call them townhomes, but some of them are connected together, have shared walls. So they're in close, dense proximity on the south side of the property. And so the initial the initial total development, actually, because there were a number of older school buildings that were on the site. The original developer used tax increment financing to do asbestos abatement on those former school buildings, and then also to raise most of the buildings on the site to make affordable development lots. And that's where a lot of those commercial projects went in: the bank, chiropractor, vision clinic, dental clinic. And then they also donated one of the original school buildings to a local church to kind of make it a mixed use look and feel. And so that went well, but then there were some of these lots that sat vacant for some time. And so one of the funding tools that was used was in partnership with the lot owner of the infill property, that they said, we won't charge our young, eager developer locally, basically won't collect the funds for the lots until they sold the townhouses. Well, if you're not having to come up with, and I think they're around 30,000 a piece on those lots, that makes a huge difference in what you're having to come up with cash on the front end. So just hearing from our local developer, he said that was such a critical piece of the puzzle, that they were willing to work with him to wait until the townhouses have sold, and then pays them accordingly. And then of course our funds, the rural workforce housing funds, we ended up putting in 200,000, about 25,000 per unit, and ultimately then as soon as a townhome was sold, then we got the funds back to be able to reinvest in new projects. You can see 7 of those townhomes have sold so far, and so just one to go. And Jacob, what are the prices on those, just for perspective?
Yeah, these townhomes, I believe, are going for like mid 200s, so 250,000. I couldn't tell you the square footage on these, but I believe 2 triplexes and 1 duplex. The bigger units are maybe upper 200s, but reasonable, falls below that limit of 325,000. It's owner occupied, so they aren't renting these out. People are buying these. And these townhomes, they aren't really meant for big families. It's maybe younger families, one kid maybe, or young professionals, maybe older adults who can move into these units, and then their home opens up for others to move into. So you have that diversity of housing. And again, 7 have sold, 1's closing at the end of this month. And with that 25,000, we'll just invest into our other projects.
And before we switch the slide here, when we had a recent conversation with our local developer, his comment was the majority of the purchasers of these townhomes are not from Seward, not from the area. So they're moving into the community. And so I'd say for our local market, we found that townhomes tend to have people that are coming into the market, but not necessarily local. So a lot of them are net new residents. And then as Jacob alluded to, we do have some older adults that have moved in and then opened up their existing homes, which have also, it's a helpful, sort of workforce housing development strategy. Next slide. Start this one off, Jacob?
Yeah, for Street Flats, this was originally Crestview Care Center, a nursing home in the community that closed in 2019. It was actually a really kind of traumatic story where the facility got bought and the new owner closed the facility within 6 days of purchasing it. We had 2 facilities actually in Seward County that closed, again, just 6 days after being purchased. So I think there's some scrambling going on as families try to find new places. But since 2019, this just sat in the community, and it really was being used as parents picked up their kids from school. Luckily, we had a developer who's done great things and won a lot of awards, who's worked with nursing homes in the past, and they've been able to transform this nursing home into some really modern apartments. And Jonathan can talk more about this, but we're having a ribbon cutting on June 8th. They're keeping the exterior shell of the building and just renovating the inside. I remember they said it's something like maybe 60 to 70% of the cost of a new build. So this is really an effective thing for them. And 21 units in the community is going to be huge for this community. They've been needing extra apartments with the local community college there that's growing. And Jonathan can talk about some of the funding tools and more of that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the nursing home closing quickly, we engaged the new owner of actually both nursing homes. We'll tell the next nursing home story in a couple of slides here. But the question was, well, what do you want to do with the properties? If you're closing it, and basically they said, well, we really don't have intentions for it long term. If you have ideas, they put it on the market to see if somebody would sort of bite on it. So the prices that they had floated, were pretty sizable. And sort of the feedback we gave, it's great if you can find a buyer, and we tried to come up with some creative ideas on what it could be to, be converted to something even beyond housing, but none of those ideas stuck. And so we really just kept coming back to housing, and that the buildings in this one was in pretty good shape on the outside, but it was also about 17,000 square feet. So, what do you do with a former nursing home in a rural community next to the school? Perfect location for workforce housing. And so we were fortunate to build a relationship with a statewide developer that had an appetite for this ultimately. And then they engaged the owner of the former Crestview Care Center and said, look, for us to have interest in this property, we really need to have a negotiated land sale. So quite a bit less than what they were asking for. And fortunately, they ended up saying yes to that. So that helped to buy the property right. It's not quite 3 acres, total acreage on the land. And again, with that about 17,000 square foot building. But then they were really forthcoming from the get-go. They said, look, we're going to need sort of multiple tools, local tools to make the numbers work. Tax increment financing was a piece of that puzzle. So fortunately, in Milford, we have a really progressive planning commission, city council that were supportive of this and helped support through TIF. And that helped subsidize some of the land purchase costs, as well as some of the public infrastructure updates on the property. And then also rural workforce housing funds. This total project is $2+ million by the time it's all said and done. And so our funds are, about a 10-year term, half a prime at the time when this was put together. And that served as the right gap financing tool that they needed to move this project forward. So we're really excited. They'll be probably the nicest apartments in the community. Sounds like they're already pre-leasing, have the ribbon cutting on June 1st. But we're really excited to get those units going. 1 bedroom, couple of 2 bedrooms as well. I think a studio as well. You can actually find it online. You'll have to Google First Street Flats. So you can see more about it. Next slide. Oh, mood lighting on our end. Oh, there we go. So this is the other nursing home that closed. This is former Utica Care Center in the community of Utica. And by the way, I should have mentioned, Seward County, we're in the Lincoln MSA, so right next to Lancaster County on I-80. So Seward's kind of in the middle. Milford's just to the south, and home of Southeast Community College. Utica is west of Seward, about 15 minutes. Utica's halfway between Seward and York. So right kind of smack dab in the middle there, but just on the western edge of Seward County, and just home of a fantastic school district, Centennial School District, which is where this property is located. You can see the highway 462 on the west side of the property. Centennial School District, elementary through high school, is just across the street there. So perfect location next to the school, the park, and the pool, all within walking distance. So former nursing home, we tried to get the same developer that worked on the former Crestview Care Center in Milford to have interest in this. Unfortunately, this property was not in as good a shape as Milford, and it unfortunately went from bad to worse. And so we talked with community leaders. We really tried to get some honest feedback from community leaders about what they needed. And we actually, in Utica, had not had a subdivision for 20 plus years. Actually, the subdivision is located just south of this. And so unfortunately just had not a lot of single family lot development in the community for quite some time. And so the sort of obvious solution then became, well, we're unfortunately going to have to take this building down because we didn't have a private sector developer to take this on. And so ultimately we had to get creative. And how do we deal with this former nursing home before it goes from bad to worse in the community? And so actually our organization partnered with a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Seward County Bridges, which is separate of our organization. And so they're a 501c3 that's been around for 25 plus years. And actually economic development is one of the tenets of their mission. And so we talked with ultimately the owners of the property, and we offered sort of to purchase the land, but asked if they would donate the building to this qualifying nonprofit. So we're going through the process of actually severing those two between the improvements in the land. And so we were able to do that to help sort of support what they were looking for to get the property for local control. And then ultimately partner with another progressive planning commission and village trustees in Utica to utilize tax increment financing. And I will also, not just give kudos to them, but also to our board of directors that said, because we don't have a private sector developer as an organization of 501c6 nonprofit, that they were willing to take this project on, and it's sizable. We're ultimately looking to create 14 affordable workforce housing lots that are mixed. You can see on the layout there, we have 7 townhouses, which on the north side, on the entrance, you can see lots 1, 2, and 3. That's a triplex. And then on the south side, lots 11 through 14, those are 2 duplexes. And then the others are single family. And then ultimately used rural workforce housing funds to help ultimately take down the building and get the dirt work completed. And so that literally is just finishing up now. And we're asking the question kind of, what's it going to take to run the infrastructure into the site, extend a brand new road. We're working with the Department of Transportation actually to move the entrance, because the school's right across the street. You can maybe see it a little bit where they have Centennial Avenue into the school. So we're having to actually move that entrance to make sure it aligns so we don't have traffic turning into each other like it is now. Let's see, anything else? What else is coming to mind for this one, Jacob?
Right now it's again, it's just bare dirt. We've been communicating with our civil engineer on how we design this moving forward. We've had lots of feedback with community leaders to go through multiple designs on this. Mm-hmm. So originally there was some more townhomes, but we were worried about parking. We also got feedback that I think there's more interest in single family home lots. So they've been involved in this process and have received really positive feedback from them about this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and actually a call that I had 3 calls last week with local developers asking about their interest. We're getting preliminary numbers back from infrastructure general contractors. And so we have a pretty good idea of what the lots are going to be at this point when everything's said and done. And I'll generally say, and I think for anybody that works on housing subdivisions, we don't have a lot of contractors that aren't busy. They're all doing good work all over the state. And so it's hard to find someone. And so we are likely going to have to wait until next year to start the infrastructure on this, just because we have so many busy general contractors that would ultimately do the grading work, into the concrete work, into the utility extensions. And so we're looking at building season of 2024 to do that, and then try to sell lots hopefully by next summer. So then the 3 developers that we talked with, they had quite a bit of interest at the lot costs that we were able to get to with this. Our organization is not in the business of making any profit on this. We just want to see more housing in Utica. So that's the goal for us, is just to recycle the dollars that we used through the Rural Workforce Housing Fund, and then tax and rent financing is helping buy down some of the costs of the lots. And then ultimately, as people pay their property taxes over the next up to 15 years, they just pay that TIF note back, working with a local bank to help secure that TIF note. Next slide. The last of the four that we'll talk about is sewer departments. Jacob, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, there was an unfortunate fire in 2007. I believe it was an auto store, Midwest Auto, possibly sort of on the west side of Seward as you drive into Seward, burned down. And since that time, it's just sat vacant. And it's a nice size. It's 2.5 acres across the street from the local grocery store. And I think there's been desire to do something there for a while, especially because it is sort of the entrance from the west into the community. Unfortunately, the first developer that looked into this project, which was originally around 43 units, decided the numbers weren't gonna work. And so we were able to partner, thankfully, with another developer who's local, who's got partners also in Nebraska. And they decided to take on this project, make some modifications to the designs. And they're working to find some other funding sources right now. You can see LB 840 and TIF are pending. But if this goes through, and I'm confident it will with these guys, it'll be the largest apartment complex in Seward County. And it's really attractive looking, and it's going to be a great piece for the community, especially on the west side, which is, again, it's workforce housing, which is perfect, especially on this west side where a lot of our larger manufacturers are located. We've got the pool over there, so it's good for families close to the fairgrounds. So it's a good area, and this will help lift it up even more, I think.
I'll add that as we looked at the price of the units on this, we specifically looked at kind of the HUD guidelines around to not be cost burden households. You shouldn't be more than 30% of gross household income. And so we're looking at a lot of young professionals, and a lot of our sort of entry level manufacturing jobs, for example, are around 40,000 a year plus benefits. And so if you're at 40,000 a year plus benefits, you're looking at probably about $900 a month for a rental unit. And so that's really where we're starting. And then it kind of goes up from there if you have multi-bedroom unit. But that's what we're trying to stick with. I know right now, because the interest rates have crept up when we actually originally engaged in this project conversation, that's making things more challenging. And as I talked with the developer about a week ago, his comment was, well, a number of years, we're just going to be doing this thing for equity. We're not going to be making necessarily a lot of money, but we know this is important for the community. And so we want to do it. And also that's why not just Rural Workforce Housing Fund, which was used to help secure the lot purchase, but LB 840, which is a percentage of our local city sales tax, will help be some gap financing with favorable terms. And then, and likely we'll have a forgivable component. That's what we had negotiated with the first developer, a percentage of that to be forgivable, also tax and rent financing. So that we're anticipating this to be over a $7 million project. So pretty sizable chunk, and it's just not inexpensive to do 2 24 unit apartment buildings to move this project forward. Next slide. So with that, we just want to say that Seward County is open for business. We know a lot of people listen to this, to this podcast, to HomeNE. Grateful for the opportunity to share our story. And we'd love to work with all of you in whatever capacity, whether we can be a resource provider. We say, Seward County is where we are, but at the end of the day, we're Team Nebraska. And so we love when all of our communities across the state win. And so we're happy to help sort of just be a sounding board if that's what you're looking for, to try to be creative, especially for these infill properties that have created challenges in your community or your county or your regions. And then ultimately, if we have people that are interested in looking for places to build, developers, we'd love to talk with you. We have a statewide developer literally coming tomorrow, that we're trying to cultivate a relationship with. So we're always open for new ideas and trying to offer opportunities to continue to build housing. We're excited and grateful to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for selecting Seward County for the next round of rural workforce housing funds.
Yeah, I'll just add, we get calls regularly from folks looking for apartments or homes. And so not only do we have the data, but we have the experience that there's not enough. And I'm sure many of you are in that same boat. This first round of rural workforce housing funds, in addition to all the, the market rate homes going up, are going to help. But we're excited for this next round, not only to build in Seward, Milford, Utica like we have, but part of our strategic plan was also to focus on some of those maybe underserved communities, those smaller communities that have some areas to grow, that have other funding programs like TIF that can be used for housing. So we've been reaching out to those local folks, and we're interested in helping those communities continue to grow as well. So.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan and Jacob. You had mentioned previously that your housing study would be available online. Can you share that link in the chat box, or Sherry, if you have it, if you would go ahead and share that so those in attendance can click on that link and see that after we're done. But does anyone have any questions for our speakers today? I wrote down a few, but I want to give opportunity for others to have some interaction with Jonathan and Jacob as well. So now's the time to enter those in your chat box, or better yet, open your microphone and just ask them directly.
I just want to say kudos to them. Working in 3 different communities, you don't always see that. You see one community maybe get a lot of attention and the others get a little whatever. So do housing in all 3, that's awesome. And to take these sites with the 2 care homes and the business that had burned and reuse those sites, that's just incredible. That's a great story. Thank you for doing that and then allowing us to showcase it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon. And I'll just mention, and I'm sure everybody on the call knows this, but economic development's a team game. And so we win as a team, and we've just had a lot of tremendous partners in this. And I think you could hear that in every project. There's nothing necessarily magical about Jacob and me. We're just the ones sort of asking the questions and trying to align the resources together. But clearly we had tremendous local leadership in all 3 of those communities to get these projects rolling, and still more work to do on some of them. But it's been fun to see people come together around good ideas, and so we're grateful to be a part of that.
So one question I had for you guys is just talk briefly about those smaller communities in Milford and Utica. What are those projects doing in those communities? You shared where they are geographically, but can you maybe talk to their population and what kind of an impact this is making for them? Sure.
I'll just kick off. So Milford, to start, a town of just over 2,000 people, home of Southeast Community College, and within pretty close proximity to the interstate. And the nursing home, the former Crestview Care Center, because of its proximity to the school, as Jacob said, it just became a de facto place for people to drop off and pick up their kids. Well, sometimes kiddos can get curious and start getting into a former building. That's not really a safe thing. And so, we were grateful to be able to reuse this building that was just sitting vacant for a number of years. 21 apartment units. This will be, one of the largest apartments within the community. Again, one of the nicest ones. Again, the statewide developer that we're fortunate to be working with, they're have great reputation. They're doing a tremendous job to build really nice units that are also affordable, specifically targeted towards that workforce housing. And I'll say that is helping specifically local employers help attract talent. As Jacob alluded to, Southeast Community College, Milford campus, They're bumping up to 1,000 students. They were closer to 650 a few years ago. So they're a growing student population. Well, that means they need to hire more faculty staff to grow those programs. And so we want those people to live locally, and you have to get people into the market before they can ultimately either buy or build a home. And so these units are a critical piece of that puzzle to help the community to continue to grow.
As I studied the concept drawing, I kept seeing new things all the time. So it looked really cool as a layout. And Utica is probably smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's the third largest community in Seward County, but only 850 population roughly. And I think it's been around that mark, or maybe even losing some population for a little while. The great part of Utica is particularly the school. Centennial Public Schools is a great school, great administrators, great students, and it's really a huge part of the community. We're really hoping with this development that'll spur on some other development, because we know of some builders who have land but haven't done anything with it yet. And so we're hoping that this project goes smoothly. They see how quickly things sell, and that's going to encourage them to do their own projects.
Yeah. So that's 14 lots, but you shared that there would be multi like duplexes and triplex and that. Did I miss it? Did you say how many total units might be developed on those 14 lots, or is that open to debate still?
Sure. We're anticipating at least 14 total housing units in that.
Okay.
You know, what we learned actually through the Rural Workforce Housing Fund, like a duplex, for example, you as a developer could build a duplex and actually live in one side and then make the other as a rental. So you then could use that 325,000 for owner occupied and then up to 250,000 for the rental unit. So you get a little more wiggle room then on the total end price of that development. So we have some people that are looking to be creative with that. You know, we'll ultimately see with those developers. We've had some that said, you know, as I shared the lot cost, they said, when will you take a check? So that's a good place to be in, even though we're essentially a year out from building that infrastructure, just with our general contractor, you know, just being booked out. But it's encouraging to see that people are hungry to build in the community of Utica.
Yeah, I think that's true with those townhomes you mentioned in Seward as well. So, yeah, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation. If somebody has a question, feel free to pop in, but talk a little bit more about the delayed lot repayment. I know that's intended to reduce the risk of the contractor. Are there any concerns, I mean, or any provisions if he doesn't sell that last townhome? What potential ramifications, if any, might there be?
Right. Yeah, good question. You know, we have had the conversations kind of on the front end with that developer, particularly through our role with the Rural Workforce Housing Fund. He said, you know, what happens if I have to turn some of these units into rentals? Like, how does that work? And so we have gone down kind of that hypothetical. I haven't been privy to the individual conversation between the lot owner seller to the developer, but I've gotten the sense that they've been flexible on the front end to say you don't have to pay us until they're sold. If they had to turn into rental units, my guess is that they would work something out ultimately.
Okay.
But we've been super encouraged that the price point they're selling them, they only have one left. I wouldn't be shocked if that sells pretty soon.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think flexibility, and especially, you know, they cultivate a relationship between that landowner and the developer buying the lots. You know, for those across on the state on this call, if you have people that own lands, this I think can be a really creative tool to say, you know, if you're willing to work with us and basically get paid after we sell the lots. I just think that makes a huge difference for how much cash people have to put into the game on the front end. It just de-risks the whole development. And so I really do think that's why these lots that had sat for essentially 10 years are finally getting developed and sold.
And that developer, I think, has been pretty encouraged with how progress has been made on that site. And he's already expressed interest in this next round of funding to do another project in the area. I think we have 4 letters of interest that we submitted in our application for this next round. And whether all those go through or not, we don't know. But those 4 plus any others that come our way, I think there'll be another 70 plus housing units, hopefully, when all things are said and done. So it's encouraging to see those additional interests from those folks.
You said it towards the end of your discussion with Seward Apartments that with costs maybe rising, the gentleman made the statement of doing it for the community. I know he has to make some profit, otherwise he wouldn't be in business long, but how do you create that culture of thought in a community? It's not natural for everybody to necessarily think that way, but for those who are with us or listening later to this, how do you create that culture?
Yeah, that's the $7 million question for this project. We're really fortunate in the developers that picked up this project, because we had our first developers teed up for this thing, and they chose to not move forward and respect that decision. When they sort of did their due diligence at the end of the day and weighed the risks, they decided to not move forward. So this is one of the principles behind it, is a local business owner. So they're already investing in the community, and then the business partners have done projects all over the state, and they understand why this matters for community, and they're really sort of a buy and hold strategy. So they're not just building this to flip it to somebody else. They're building it to hold it and to see it through to fruition. But I don't think it's just these individuals that sort of have that mindset. We're very fortunate in Seward County that we're the 9th fastest growing county in the state over this last census, and that doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There's sort of a general sense that people have a desire to grow, that they don't want to just stick with the status quo, and in some sense, they know that there has to be diversification of investment, or we can start to move in the wrong direction as communities, as a county. And so there is sort of a general appetite for that, and not just on for-profit development, but also super philanthropic community. From basically every project that we worked on, people come to the table and sort of put their money where their mouth is and say, this is a place worth investing in.
Yeah, just your local fundraising for the 2 rounds of rural workforce housing money is incredible. That you've built a chest of opportunity moving forward. And as Sharon often says, activity breeds activity. No doubt these are going to be a catalyst for private development and new builds throughout the county. So
absolutely. And I'll just mention, because we want to give kudos to our donor, to our investors in this. I mean, we have people that gave $500 to I think 75,000, and basically everything in between. And public-private partners, local restaurants, our local movie theater gave in the first round. I mean, just unbelievable generosity, and even individuals saying this matters for the future of our place.
Yeah, what a wonderful culture that is. So kudos to you guys for creating that. So anybody have questions for Jacob or Jonathan? Well, let's go ahead and show their contact slide. If you do have questions for them, feel free to reach out to them. Their phone numbers and their emails are both there. Sorry, guys, we won't be in the dark too long there, but feel free to reach out to them. I mean, conversation is where it's at, and it's always good to have those sidebar conversations to learn. So, okay, so let's begin to wrap up. And just as a reminder, we do put all of our webinars on our HomeNE.us website. And just a quick, occasionally we like to touch base on past webinars. And in February, the Village of Ansley shared what they had been doing in building new housing. And I was in Ansley earlier this month and took a picture of a project that they had shared with us in February. And that's there on your slide. So you can see how that house is coming along for them. And that is their fourth house that they have built in the last 2 to 3 years in a town of 400 people. And our next webinar is June 15th at 2 o'clock. So feel free to join us there and check out today's webinar as well as next month's webinar and all past webinars on our website. And then just one more thing we want to share with you, an update on our spring gathering. For those of you new, we do a gathering 2 times a year. It's an in-person event and it's a day devoted to housing topics. And we are chatting about your housing game plan. We're meeting Thursday, June 22nd in Central City. We have sent out information and you'll be getting some updated information this afternoon in your email about the about the gathering. So feel free to check that out and register for that. You won't be in trouble if you don't attend, but you might be sorry that you didn't. So we're looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible on Thursday, June 22nd in Central City. So with that, once again, Jacob, Jonathan, and Seward County Chamber Economic Development Partnership people for all you're doing and for presenting today. So we really appreciate it and look forward to following your progress there in Seward County. So, and with that, good afternoon and have a great rest of your day to all of you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.